Hi Year 11, this is a quick video to take you through how to approach Paper 1 Question 2. So once you've completed Paper 1 Question 1, you should spend some time reading the entire text out through its entirety. Once you've done that, you can turn to Paper 1 Question 2 and approach that. For this question, you may well need a highlighter to accompany your writing pen. So, look at this extract in detail. Look in detail at this extract from lines 9 to 15 of the source. How does the writer use language here to convey Mr. Fisher's views on books and stories of the past? So what I'm focusing on here are the language techniques that are being used to show me or convey Mr. Fisher's views on books and stories. It then tells me in the bullet points that I might want to include the writer's choice of words and phrases, language structures and techniques. My suggestion is that you don't bother trying to write about sentence forms. It's not essential and it won't prevent you from achieving the full marks. So by language, it is specifically looking at words, phrases and literary devices used by the writer, and in this instance the writer's surname is Harris. We're looking at Mr. Fisher's views and we need to focus specifically on books and stories of the past. So what does he think, feel or imagine? It's worth 8 marks, so we are looking for 2 to 3 what, how, why paragraphs. Before we can do that, we need to make sure that we read through the extract and we've selected 2, if not 3 or 4 examples of language that we're going to be able to write about. Mr. Fisher remembered a time, surely not so long ago, when books were golden. So that tells us something. When imagination soared, when the world was filled with stories that ran like gazelles and pounced like tigers and exploded like rockets, illuminating minds and hearts. He had seen it happen, had seen whole classes swept away in a fever. In those days there were heroes, there were dragons and dinosaurs. There were space adventures and soldiers of fortune and giant apes. In those days, thought Mr. Fisher, we dreamed in colour, though films were in black and white, and good always triumphed in the end. So what we need to do is to make sure that we know what we're going to be writing about. Now you can see that this piece of text is actually very rich in things that we might be able to talk about in relation to the question focus. So we need to make sure that we're going to be able to choose 2 to 3 examples that we'll be able to write about with confidence and in detail. So if I look here, the first thing I'm probably going to want to talk about is the use of the adjective golden. And I'm going to want to think about what that adjective suggests about Mr. Fisher's idea. So I'm going to say that it makes us think about treasure, that it makes us think about something that he cherishes. I'm also going to say that he's possibly a little bit nostalgic. He seems to have very fond memories of the past. And we can see this here when he says things like imagination soared, when the world was filled with stories that ran like gazelles and pounced like tigers. So all of this makes it seem very exciting very exciting through the use of these phrases. And if we look here at words like illuminating and pounced, these verbs are very active and exciting. So that's certainly something I might want to talk about. I could talk about the fact that he talks about how we were swept away in a fever. And so what he's basically saying is that stories used to be contagious, used to sweep us away and make us really interested. We could talk about here this idea of the heroes, the dragons and the dinosaurs, and how his feelings were that these stories used to be dramatic and exciting. He also makes it sound like we're in a bit of a spell, so that we dreamed in colour. So he's perhaps suggesting that imaginations used to be better. And the fact that good always triumphed in the end might tell us something about his moral standings with regards to stories. So you can see here that the first part of my time has been taken up with annotating and considering. And what this should give me is plenty of ideas to write about now when it comes to my 2 to 3 what, how, why paragraphs. So remember, what I want to do is I want to show that I've got a clear or perceptive understanding of the way in which language is being used. And I need to base that very much on the extract that I have in front of me, and only that extract, and I need to be able to explore the languages being used. I also don't need to repeat everything that happens in the question, because I'm going to be wasting words. So a really effective way to start this is to start with the writer's surname. So we're going to say Harris, if that's the name of the writer. Harris uses an adjective, and then we're going to use golden. Uses an adjective golden to suggest that Mr. Fisher, and then I'm going to look at my notes, and I've got here treasured, cherishes and nostalgic. So that Mr. Fisher has a nostalgic fondness towards books and stories of the past. It appears that he believes that these, I'm going to use golden again, that these golden books were a treasure to be challenged. Now I need to consider how that's going to make my my reader perhaps feel. So Harris uses an adjective golden to suggest that Mr. Fisher has a nostalgic fondness towards books and stories of the past. It appears that he believes that these golden books were a treasure. I've put here to be challenged, and I meant to say cherished, so that's the importance of proofreading. So believes that these golden books were a treasure to be cherished, thus indicating to the reader that he places a great deal of emphasis on books. Now that's one paragraph written. It's only taken me about 3.5 minutes to write. That gives me plenty of time to do another one for you. So I'm going to move straight on to looking at this idea about imagination soared, that the world was filled with stories that pounced like tigers. So I'm going to say Harris creates the impression that Mr. Fisher believes that the world was filled with stories by fusing. So by using this verb, I'm highlighting to the examiner, to the marker, that I understand that the writer is purposely doing this by fusing together a range of active verbs and exciting, let's put dangerous, and dangerous nouns. Now I need to introduce my idea of those active verbs and dangerous nouns, and so I'm looking at pounced like tigers and exploded like rockets. So pounced like tigers and exploded like rockets. Now, before I move on from that, I need to make sure that I've fully explored why that's going to show us that he thinks the world was full of stories. So I'm going to say, through Harris's use of the dynamic verbs pounced and exploded, she conveys that Mr. Fisher felt that stories were something that lived. By using, and we called them dangerous, we're going to stick with that again, by using dangerous and exciting nouns such as tiger and rockets, the reader understands that Mr. Fisher thinks stories were thinks that stories were fast-paced, exciting, and full of imagination. Now at this point I've done my 2 paragraphs. I've used about 7 minutes worth of writing time to write those 2 detailed paragraphs. I've allowed myself 12 minutes or so for this question once I'd done my reading, and so that still gives me enough time to write a 3rd paragraph if I have something else that I feel that I could say. And if I consider that extract, there are quite a few things that I've still got left to say. But the one that stands out to me as something I really want to talk about is that metaphorical idea about being swept away with the fever. So I'm going to do 1 remaining paragraph. Furthermore, Harris conveys that Mr. Fisher believes that stories used to consume his classes excitement. And so the quotation that we're going for is whole class is swept away in a fever. Whole classes swept away in a fever. So I've not mentioned my technical term here in this first section. It doesn't mean that it's something I don't need to include. I'm just going to place it somewhere here. So I'm going to say that Harris's vivid use of a frenzied metaphor, remember I'm commenting on what she's doing, the frenzied metaphor of being swept away, clearly demonstrates to the reader that Mr. Fisher believes stories were so good, stories and books were so good that they consumed, that they took over his students' lives and imaginations. So there you go, Year 11. That's a walkthrough of Paper 1, Question 2. Thanks then, goodbye.